The wind that morning came off the mountains cold and without apology. The kind of cold that doesn't announce itself gradually but simply arrives all at once, pressing flat against whatever it finds. It was the kind of morning that made you walk faster and think less, and most people in Harlow Falls, a small city pressed into the eastern slope of the Blue Ridge Range in western North Carolina, had their chins tucked and their eyes down by the time the clock on the old courthouse hit 7:30. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Lily Chen walked to work the same way she had walked to work every morning for the past 3 years, down Marigold Street, left on Commerce, past the old hardware store with the faded painted window, past the dry cleaner that had been closing for as long as anyone could remember, and finally through the glass door of Harlow Falls Community Hospital, where she worked as a patient care aide on the third-floor geriatric ward. She was 23 years old with a slight build and dark hair she kept in a low braid at the back of her neck, and she walked the way people walk when they have somewhere to be and no margin for delay. She had been up since 5. She had made breakfast for her grandmother, measured out the morning medications, helped with the compression stockings that Nai circulation required now, and written a note on the kitchen table in large clear letters reminding her grandmother not to use the stove while Lily was at work, because twice last month the burner had been left on and Lily had come home to a kitchen full of smoke and her grandmother serenely watching television in the next room, entirely unaware. The note was a daily ritual. Whether it helped was a separate and more uncertain question. Her grandmother, Mei Chen, was 78 years old and had come from Fujian province in China to Harlow Falls in 1987 with Lily's grandfather, who had found work in the textile mill that no longer existed. The grandfather had died when Lily was 4, and Nai had raised Lily's mother in a small rented house on Birch Street. And then, when Lily's mother had died of a heart attack at 41, she had raised Lily in the same house, with the same quiet particular determination, the same insistence on eating properly and studying hard and not letting any difficulty, however real, become a reason to stop moving forward. Lily had grown up watching her grandmother navigate a world that was often not especially designed for her, the language difficulties, the paperwork that arrived in forms Nai could not always read, the doctors who sometimes spoke too quickly and did not pause to check whether they had been understood. Lily had become, by the time she was 12, her grandmother's primary interpreter in every practical sense of the word, handling the phone calls and the forms and the careful translations, and she had taken all of it on with the matter-of-fact competence of a child who has understood that some things simply need to be done and there is no one else to do them. The hospital job was not what she had originally intended for herself. She had wanted to study nursing, had been accepted to the program at Asheville Community College, had lasted 1 semester before her grandmother's health began its slow decline and the financial arithmetic of tuition, rent, and medical costs stopped adding up in any configuration that allowed for school. She had withdrawn, quietly and without drama, found the aide position at Harlow Falls Community Hospital, and reorganized her plans into something that could exist around the reality of what her life actually required. She did not speak about this at work. She was known there as reliable and efficient and kind, particularly with the older patients on the 3rd floor, who responded to her with a warmth that the charge nurses had noticed and occasionally commented on. There was something in the way she positioned herself when speaking to a confused or frightened elderly patient, slightly lower, slightly closer, her voice unhurried, her attention complete and visibly genuine, that communicated a kind of patience that could not be performed. It was the patience of someone who had grown up beside age and difficulty and had learned to take both seriously. She was not paid well. She was not paid badly, for the kind of work and the size of the town, but she was not paid in any way that left significant margin at the end of the month. The rent on the Birch Street house was low because it was old and in need of repairs that the landlord addressed at the speed of someone who knew there was no realistic alternative for his tenants. The utilities were manageable in most months and not manageable in others. Nai's prescriptions were covered partially by Medicare and not fully by anything, and the gap was a number that Lily carried in the back of her mind at all times like a figure on a balance sheet that never quite resolved itself. She did not think of herself as someone to be pitied. This was important and she was firm about it in the private interior way that people are firm about things they have decided. She had her grandmother, who was still largely herself, still sharp in her opinions and vivid in her presence even as her body required more managing. She had work she was genuinely good at. She had the mountains, which were always there at the end of whatever street she stood on, solid and unhurried, and she had found over the years a deep and wordless comfort in that particular constancy. On this particular morning in the third week of November, the wind off the mountains felt like the beginning of something harder, and Lily walked with her hands deep in her jacket pockets and her mind already organizing the day ahead. She did not notice the old man until she had nearly stepped around him. He was seated on the wooden bench outside the CVS on Commerce Street, the bench that the city had installed 2 summers ago as part of a downtown improvement initiative that had produced 3 benches and a new crosswalk before the funding ran out. He was sitting in the specific hunched posture of someone who has been sitting for long enough that the cold has gotten properly into the bones. He wore a heavy overcoat that had once been very good and showed its age now only at the cuffs and collar, a wool scarf wound somewhat haphazardly around his neck, and no hat. He was perhaps 75, perhaps older, with white hair that the wind was doing as it pleased with and the kind of large-knuckled hands that speak of a lifetime of physical work, folded now in his lap over the handle of a plain black cane. What stopped Lily was his expression. He was not looking at anything in particular. He was looking at the middle distance with the particular blankness of someone whose mind is somewhere else entirely, somewhere not comfortable, and there was a quality to his stillness that distinguished it from ordinary stillness, the held-in quality of a person trying not to show something they cannot quite contain. Lily stopped. She had 3 minutes before she needed to be at the hospital entrance to be on time for her shift. She had learned over years to calculate these margins precisely because she could not afford to be written up for tardiness and because being late meant the outgoing aide on the previous shift had to wait, and Lily was constitutionally uncomfortable with imposing on people. She had 3 minutes. She stopped anyway. "Sir," she said, "are you all right?" He did not respond immediately. Then he turned his head toward her with the slight delay of someone returning from a distance. His eyes, when they focused on her, were dark gray and sharp in a way that the rest of his face, lined and weather-worn and carrying something tired, did not immediately suggest. He looked at her for a moment without speaking. "I am sitting," he said finally, in a voice that carried the faint remnants of an accent she could not quite place. Eastern European, perhaps. Something that had spent decades softening against American speech without entirely disappearing. "I can see that," Lily said. "You've been sitting for a little while. I noticed when I came around the corner." He looked at her steadily. "You noticed. It's cold," she said simply. He did not deny this. He looked out at the street for a moment, then back at her. "I am waiting for someone," he said. "They are late." Lily looked at her watch. "How long have you been waiting?" A pause. "I am not certain." He said it with the careful precision of someone who does not wish to be inaccurate rather than someone who is confused, and Lily recognized the distinction because she had learned to recognize it from her work and from her grandmother. An hour, perhaps. Possibly more. An hour in this cold on this bench without a hat. "Do you have somewhere you can go inside while you wait?" she asked. "The CVS is open. It's warm in there." He glanced at the door. Something moved across his face that was not quite refusal but was adjacent to it. "I don't wish to purchase anything." "You don't have to purchase anything to stand inside a store," Lily said. "They're not going to throw you out." He looked at her again with those sharp gray eyes. "You don't know that." She almost said something reassuring, then stopped herself because the honest answer was that he was right. She didn't know that, and he had probably lived long enough to know that reassurances constructed from uncertainty were worth very little. "Fair point," she said instead. "What if I walk in with you?" He studied her for a moment. "You have somewhere to be." "I have a couple of minutes." She did not have a couple of minutes in any real sense, but she had made her decision while he was speaking and the decision was already made. He looked at her for a beat longer, then placed his cane carefully against the bench and rose with the deliberate, self-contained effort of a person who has learned to manage the indignities of a body that requires more management than it once did, without asking for help and without making the effort visible to others if it can be avoided. Lily did not reach out to assist him. She understood, from long practice, the difference between helping and hovering, and that some people require you to offer your presence without making their difficulty into a performance. She held the CVS door open. He walked in. The warmth of the store came out to meet them. He stood inside the entrance, and Lily watched some of the rigid, held-in quality of his posture release, very slightly, as the warmth reached him. "Better?" she said. He did not answer directly. He looked down at his cane and then at her. "You work at the hospital," he said. It was not a question. He had noticed the lanyard with her badge, she supposed. "Third floor," she said. "Geriatric." "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. "My wife was on a geriatric ward," he said. "In March. For 3 weeks." Lily waited. She did not fill the silence with the standard expressions of sympathy that most people reached for automatically. She simply waited the way her grandmother had taught her, the way the older patients on her ward had taught her in turn, to let a person arrive at what they actually meant to say rather than accepting whatever approximation got there first. "She passed in April," he said. "I'm sorry," Lily said. She meant it without decoration. He nodded once. "She was the one who waited for people," he said, and his voice shifted very slightly on the words, barely perceptibly, the way the surface of still water shifts when something moves beneath it. "She was better at it than I am." Lily looked at the old man and thought about her grandmother, about the particular loneliness of outliving the person who has been beside you for most of a life, the way that kind of loss rearranges the architecture of every ordinary day. "That sounds like someone worth missing," she said. He looked at her. "Yes," he said. She checked her watch. She was going to be 1 minute late. She made the calculation and accepted it. "Is there someone who can come and get you?" she said. "If the person you're waiting for isn't coming, I mean, do you have family nearby?" Something shifted in his expression. Not coldness, not exactly, but a kind of careful neutrality that she recognized as the face people put on when a topic is complicated and they have decided not to open it all the way. "My son was supposed to come," he said. "He may be delayed. He is a busy man." "Of course," Lily said. She reached into her bag and found the small notepad she kept there for work purposes and wrote her name and her cell number on it and tore the sheet off and held it out to him. "If you're still waiting and you need anything, or if you need someone to call the hospital or help you find a ride, you can use that number." He looked at the paper. He looked at her. "You don't know me," he said. "No," she agreed. "Why would you give your number to a stranger?" Lily considered the question honestly. "Because you've been sitting outside in the cold for an hour waiting for someone who didn't come," she said. "And because that's a hard morning to have. And because I work 3 blocks away and I can be useful if you need something." She paused. "And because you remind me of my grandmother's husband, who I never actually met, but whose photograph I've looked at my whole life, and there is something about your hands." She stopped, mildly embarrassed by the specificity of it. "I'm sorry, that's a strange thing to say." He looked at his own hands, then back at her. The careful neutrality was still there, but something beneath it had shifted in a way she could not precisely name. "It is not strange," he said. He took the paper. He folded it once and placed it in the breast pocket of the overcoat, the deliberate placement of someone who intends to keep something rather than losing it in the general disorder of a coat pocket. "Thank you," he said. "I hope the rest of your morning is warmer," she said. Then she went to work. She was 90 seconds late. The charge nurse, Patricia Odom, who had been with the hospital for 22 years and had developed over that time a fine-grained sense of which lateness was avoidable and which was not, glanced at the clock when Lily came through the ward door and then at Lily's face and said, "Everything okay?" "Yes," Lily said. "Sorry. I stopped to help someone on the street." Patricia looked at her for 1 more second. "Clock in," she said. "Mrs. Delacroix in 304 has been asking for you since 6:30. The morning was full in the particular way that geriatric ward mornings were full, layered with the specific rhythms of bodies that needed tending and minds that were variously present and the 1,000 small negotiations between dignity and necessity that her work required her to conduct with patience and without condescension. She liked this work. She had realized somewhere in the 2nd year that the part of her that had wanted to study nursing had not been wrong, had simply arrived at its destination by a different road and was now doing what it had always been inclined toward, which was being present for people whose circumstances required exactly the kind of attention she was, by nature and by experience, equipped to give. At 11:30, during her break, she checked her phone and found a text from an unknown number. The message read, I am still at the CVS. My son has not come. I do not wish to trouble you. I am including this information only because you asked me to. My name is Viktor. She stared at the message for a moment. Then she typed back, I have a break until noon. Can you get to the hospital entrance? I'll meet you. The reply came within 30 seconds. I can walk. Thank you. She found him at the main entrance at 10 minutes to 12, standing with his cane on the sidewalk outside the automatic doors in the thin November sunlight. He had gotten a cup of coffee somewhere, which was a good sign. He was holding it with both hands the way you hold something warm when you have been cold for a long time. Viktor, she said when she reached him. He inclined his head slightly. You remembered. I have a good memory for names, she said. It's useful in my job. She looked at him with the same calm assessment she applied to patients, not clinical exactly, more a habit of really looking. He was steadier than he had been on the bench. The coffee and the warmth had helped. But there was still the tiredness, the particular tiredness of grief that doesn't resolve in a day or a week or several months. Have you eaten anything this morning? He considered the question as though it were mildly unexpected. Coffee, he said. That's not food. It is a beginning toward food. A very distant beginning. She looked at her watch. I have 30 minutes. There's a cafeteria inside. If you come in with me, I'll buy you something to eat while we figure out how to get you where you need to go. He looked at the hospital entrance. He looked at her. You are spending your break on a stranger again. You told me your name, she said. You're less of a stranger. He made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but occupied the space where a laugh might have been if he had been a person who laughed easily. He came inside. The cafeteria on the ground floor was warm and smelled of institutional soup and coffee and the particular blandness of food prepared in large quantities. Lily paid for a bowl of chicken soup and a piece of cornbread and a second coffee and set them in front of Viktor at a table by the window. She had a cup of tea for herself and a granola bar she had been saving since morning and had now decided to consider lunch. He looked at the food. This is too much, he said. Soup and cornbread, she said. In November. In North Carolina. This is the minimum. He looked at her over the soup. You are stubborn, he said. I prefer thorough, she said. He began to eat, and she could see from the way he did it that he had been hungry for longer than just this morning, the particular unhurried intentional quality of someone who has been eating irregularly and is allowing themselves, in this moment, to actually take in what is in front of them. She thought about not asking, and then she asked. Your son, she said. Is he someone you can call? Does he know you've been waiting this long? Viktor set down the spoon. He looked at the table for a moment. My son and I have a complicated relationship, he said, in the tone of a man who has selected the most neutral possible language for something that is not neutral. He agreed to pick me up this morning because I had an appointment at a medical office here in town. He paused. I do not drive anymore. I had to take a taxi to get to the bench this morning. I could not afford the taxi to wait. Another pause. The appointment was at 8. He was going to take me and then bring me home. He looked at his hands around the coffee cup. He did not come. Lily absorbed this without comment for a moment. What time is the appointment? It was at 9:30. I called the office from the CVS. They rescheduled for next Thursday. They were kind about it. He looked at her. I do not understand why they were kind about it. It was not their fault. Sometimes people are kind for no particular reason, Lily said. He looked at her steadily. This is not my experience of the world, he said. Not recently. She looked at him. Where do you live? Millbrook Road. The east side. The house with the blue door. He said it with the particularity of someone who has lived in a place long enough that they have stopped thinking of it in terms of addresses and think of it in terms of the specific details that make it recognizable as theirs. My wife planted roses along the front walk, he added. They are not doing well this year without her. Lily felt something in her chest that was not quite grief but lived close to it. She thought about her grandmother in the Birch Street house, the way the house had its own quality of her, the particular arrangement of the photographs on the wall and the specific place the tea tin was kept and the way the kitchen smelled in the mornings when Nai made congee. She thought about what it would be like to live in that house without those things. Millbrook Road, she said. That's about 4 miles. Yes. I get off at 3 today, she said. I can take you home after my shift. He looked at her with the sharp gray eyes that she was beginning to understand were the most honest part of his face, the part that showed what he actually thought before the rest of him had a chance to organize a more composed response. You would do this, he said. It was not quite a question. It was the sound of a person testing whether something they are hearing is real. I have a car, she said. Millbrook Road is on the way to where I buy groceries. This was not precisely true. Millbrook Road was in the opposite direction from the grocery store she used. She said it in the same level tone she used for true things and did not examine her own reasoning too carefully. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I would like to pay you. You don't need to pay me. I would like to. Then you can tell me something about the roses, she said. What kind did your wife plant? He looked at her. The something beneath the careful neutrality shifted again, and this time she could almost name it. He looked like a person who has been carrying something alone for a very long time and has been unexpectedly offered a place to set it down for a moment. Climbing roses, he said. Dark red. The kind that come back every year regardless of what you do to them or don't do to them. She called them stubborn roses. He paused. I told her they took after her. Did she agree? She said that if the roses had any sense, they should be so lucky. He looked out the window at the November street. She said that every year until this one. Lily looked at him and did not say anything, because there was nothing to say that would help, and she had learned early that unhelpful things set into grief are a form of abandonment dressed as company. They sat together for a while in the warm cafeteria with the soup and the coffee and the thin November light coming through the windows, and Lily let the quiet be what it needed to be, and Viktor seemed to understand this the way he seemed to understand, without her saying so, a number of things about the kind of person she was. At 10 minutes to 12, she stood to go back to her shift. I'll meet you back here at 3:15, she said. He looked up at her. You are very certain you are going to do this? 3:15, she said again, and went back to work. The rest of her shift passed in the way shifts passed when the mind is properly occupied, continuously and without significant gaps. Mrs. Delacroix in 304 needed her dressing changed and was in a talkative mood, which meant that the dressing change took twice as long as scheduled and was twice as pleasant. Mr. Henderson in 309 had had a difficult night and was resistant to the afternoon medication, and Lily spent 20 minutes sitting with him, not trying to convince him of anything, simply keeping him company while he found his way back to himself. The new patient in 312, a woman named Dorothy who had come in 2 days ago following a fall and was still uncertain what was happening to her, reached out and grabbed Lily's hand during the afternoon vitals check and said, You have your mother's hands, which was the kind of thing patients said sometimes from somewhere deeper than ordinary conversation, and which Lily received with the same genuine attention she received everything from the people in her care. By 3 o'clock, she had finished her charting and completed her handoff and was in the locker room changing out of her scrubs with the particular relief of a body that has been standing for most of 7 hours. She was tired in the clean, uncomplicated way that comes from working hard at something that matters, and she was thinking about Nai and the note on the kitchen table and whether she needed to stop for bread on the way home, and somewhere underneath all of it she was thinking about Viktor and the bench and the son who had not come. She found him in the cafeteria at 3:15. Exactly where she had left him. He had a book open on the table in front of him. She could not read the title from the door, but she could see that it was a real book, hardcover, the kind of book a person carries because they have read it before and intend to read it again. He was not reading it when she came in. He was sitting with his hands on the open pages and his eyes out the window, which told her something she had not needed to be told but found herself noting anyway. Ready? She said. He closed the book. He stood. He looked at her, and for the first time she thought she saw something in his face beyond the careful composure and the grief, something that was trying to become gratitude but was not quite there yet, still working itself through whatever the pride of an old man who had managed his own life for a very long time required before it could arrive at gratitude without discomfort. Ready, he said. Her car was a 12-year-old Honda Civic that she had bought for $4,800 3 years ago from a co-worker's husband. It was not a car that advertised itself, which was fine. She had never required her possessions to make statements on her behalf. Viktor got in without comment and buckled his seatbelt with methodical care and held his cane upright between his knees the way a person holds something they are responsible for. She pulled out of the hospital parking lot and headed east toward Millbrook Road. For the first few minutes they drove without speaking, which she did not find uncomfortable and which he appeared not to find uncomfortable either. The late afternoon light was doing what it did in November in the mountains, going gold and low and slightly melancholy in the way that November light had decided a long time ago was its proper mode. "Tell me about your grandmother," Viktor said, with the straightforwardness of a man who has decided that small talk is a waste of the time remaining to him and prefers to go directly toward the things that matter. Lily glanced at him briefly. "What makes you ask? You mentioned her this morning. The photograph." "I did," she acknowledged. She drove for a moment. "Her name is May. She came from China when she was in her 40s with my grandfather, who worked in the mill until it closed. She raised my mother here and then she raised me." "Your parents?" "My grandfather died when I was 4. My mother had a heart attack when I was 15. He was quiet. "So it has been the two of you?" "Yes." "How is she?" Lily considered. "Her mind is still mostly sharp. Her body needs more help than it used to. She has opinions about my cooking, which is a good sign." She paused. "She is the reason I do what I do. I was going to be a nurse. It didn't work out the way I planned. But I think I'm doing the same work by a different road." "She taught you how to sit with people," Viktor said. Lily looked at the road ahead of her. "Yes," she said. "That's exactly right. It is a specific skill," he said. "Many people cannot do it. They become uncomfortable with silence, with grief. They want to fill it with words that are not useful." He paused. "My wife was like your grandmother in that way. She could sit with a person in difficulty and simply be present, without requiring anything from the silence. I always found it remarkable." "How long were you married?" Lily asked. 51 years, he said. And the number landed in the car with the specific weight of a thing that is not just a number. Lily did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, "That's a long time to know someone." "Yes," he said. "It is also a long time to forget how to be a person without them." She turned onto Millbrook Road. The houses here were older, set back from the road, with large trees in the yards that had been large for a long time. It was a quiet street, the kind of street that felt like it had made a decision in the 1960s about what kind of street it was going to be and had been keeping to that decision ever since. "Blue door," he said. She found it. A gray house with a blue door, precisely as described. The rose canes along the front walk were bare and brown in the November cold, but you could see the shape of what they would be in spring, the arc of them, the intention. Someone had planted them with care and with knowledge of what they would become. She pulled into the driveway. Viktor unbuckled his seatbelt with the same methodical deliberateness he had buckled it, and gathered his cane, and looked at the house for a moment in the way of someone who has not been away for very long but who still, each time they return, must make some internal adjustment to the fact of the house without the person who made it a home. "Thank you," he said, "for the soup, for the ride." "Of course," Lily said. He reached into the breast pocket of the overcoat, where he had placed her phone number that morning. He did not take the paper out. He left his hand on it for a moment, an odd gesture, almost like checking that it was still there. Then he looked at her. "I don't need payment," she said, before he could offer it. He looked at her steadily. "I know you said that. I meant it." He held her gaze for a moment, the sharp gray eyes carrying something she still could not quite name, something layered and complex that belonged to a person who had seen a great deal of the world and had developed careful opinions about what was rare in it. "I believe you," he said. He got out of the car. He walked to the blue door, and she waited until he had unlocked it and gone inside before she backed out of the driveway. She drove toward the grocery store, which was in the opposite direction, and she thought about roses that came back every year regardless of what you did to them, and about a woman who had said that if the roses had any sense, they should be so lucky. She was not thinking about Viktor's son. That thought would come later, when she was home and Nai was telling her about the afternoon program she had watched on television and the neighbor who had knocked on the door and the perfectly reasonable opinion Nai had about the way Lily had trimmed the front hedge last weekend. Lily would sit at the kitchen table and let the ordinary warmth of the evening close around her, and somewhere in the middle of it the thought would arrive quietly, like a stone dropped into still water. A son who had not come. A man who had sat on a bench for over an hour in the November cold because he had no other way to get where he needed to go, and the person who had agreed to take him had decided, for whatever reason, that something else mattered more. She put the thought away. She had enough of her own life to manage. She could not carry other people's family dynamics on top of it. The thought did not entirely stay put. But that was a later problem. For now, there was the grocery store, and the bread she needed, and Nai-Nai's voice already telling the story of her afternoon before Lily had even gotten through the door. She bought the bread. She went home. The next morning was colder. She walked to work the same way she always walked, down Marigold, left on Commerce, past the hardware store, past the dry cleaner. The bench outside the CVS was empty. This should not have been a relief, and she noted with mild self-awareness that it was anyway. The morning passed without incident. She had a good shift, the kind where everything that needed doing got done and no one was in distress that could not be addressed, and the ordinary human work of caring for people went forward without the specific crises that sometimes interrupted it. She ate her lunch in the cafeteria and read 3 pages of the novel she carried in her bag and thought about nothing in particular. At 2 in the afternoon, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She looked at it. Not the same number Viktor had texted from yesterday. A different number. The message read, "This is Marcus, Viktor's son. I understand you helped my father yesterday. I wanted to thank you. He mentioned you by name." She stared at the message for a moment. Then she typed, "I'm glad he got home all right. Please make sure he gets to his appointment next Thursday." A long pause. Then, "Yes, of course. He mentioned you work at the hospital. Are you a nurse?" She typed, "Patient care aide. 3rd floor." Another pause. Then, "I'd like to properly thank you for what you did. Would you be willing to meet for coffee?" She considered this. She considered it with the same practical assessment she applied to most things, which was to identify what was actually being asked and what the straightforward answer to it was. She typed, "That's not necessary. Your father just needed a warm place and a ride home. Anyone would have done the same." The reply came quickly, "Not anyone. Several people walked past him on that bench. He told me how many." She did not respond to that immediately. She put her phone away and went back to her shift. On her way home that afternoon, she passed the bench outside the CVS. She stopped and looked at it for a moment, the empty wooden bench in the November cold, and she thought about the number of people who had walked past Viktor that morning while he sat with his cold hands and his complicated relationship with a son who had not come. She did not know Marcus. She did not know what his reasons had been, whether they were the reasons of a genuinely busy man who had made a mistake in his scheduling or the reasons of something more complicated, some long history between a father and a son that she had no visibility into. She did not know whether the warmth in his text was genuine or performed. She had learned to be careful about assuming either. What she knew was that Viktor had sat on a bench for over an hour in the cold, and that she had stopped, and that something in the stopping had mattered, and that matching had nothing to do with Marcus and nothing to do with gratitude and nothing to do with coffee. She texted back that evening from her kitchen table while Nai played solitaire on the tablet Lily had bought her for her birthday. She typed, "Coffee is fine. I work mornings most days. I'm usually free after 4. The reply came quickly. "Tomorrow. For 30. Grounds Coffee on Elm Street. I'll be there." She put the phone down and looked at her grandmother arranging the cards on the tablet screen with the focused intensity of a woman who takes solitaire seriously. Nai did not look up. "Who are you texting?" Nai said in Mandarin. "A man," Lily said. Nai looked up then, over her reading glasses. "What kind of man?" "The son of someone I helped yesterday." Nai considered this. "How old?" "I don't know," Lily said. "I've never met him. Is he kind?" Lily thought about the text messages. The careful gratitude, the quickness of the replies, the detail that Viktor had mentioned her by name. She thought about the bench and the empty morning and the number of people who had walked past without stopping. "I don't know that yet either," she said. Nai returned to her solitaire. "You'll find out," she said, in the tone of a woman who considers this self-evident. "You always do." Grounds Coffee on Elm Street was a place Lily had been to perhaps a dozen times, always alone. And always for the same reason, the occasional luxury of sitting somewhere warm and pleasant and outside her own apartment that cost less than $8 and could be stretched for 90 minutes if she nursed the cup carefully. It had exposed brick and mismatched chairs and the particular atmosphere of a locally owned coffee shop that has found its footing and is not trying to be anything other than what it is. She arrived at 4:25. She did not know what Marcus looked like, but she had not thought carefully enough about this until she was standing inside the door looking at the room. She considered that she could text him, and then she saw a man in the far corner stand up from a table where he had been sitting with his coat still on, the posture of someone who arrived early and has been waiting and is aware of the waiting, and something in the specific quality of his standing up told her that was him. He was perhaps 45. He had his father's height and a version of his father's bearing, though the edges of it were softer, more contemporary, shaped by a different kind of life. Dark hair going gray at the temples. Well-dressed in the practical way of someone whose clothes are good but worn without ceremony. He looked like a man who was used to being in charge of situations and who was, in this particular moment, not entirely sure what kind of situation this was, which she noted and found mildly interesting. "Lily," he said when she was close enough. "Marcus," she said. They sat. He had already ordered coffee. She ordered tea. He looked at her across the small table with the focused attention of someone who has come with specific intentions and is now recalibrating them against the actual person in front of him. "My father said you were young," he said. "He didn't say how young." 23, she said. "How old did he think I was?" "He said you seemed young, but that you sat with people the way someone much older does." He paused. "That was a compliment from him. He doesn't give them frequently." "I noticed he chooses his words carefully," she said. "He always has." Marcus wrapped his hands around his coffee cup, a gesture that reminded her immediately and exactly of Viktor doing the same thing with the cup of coffee on the bench, and something about the inherited habit, entirely unconscious, moved through her with more feeling than she had expected. "I owe him an apology," Marcus said, looking at the table for a moment. "Yesterday, I had a meeting that ran over and I didn't call him in time. By the time I reached out, he had already left the bench." He paused. "He doesn't always tell me when things have been difficult. He would rather manage on his own." "I got that impression," Lily said. "He mentioned you paid for his lunch." "Soup and cornbread," she said. "In November." "He hasn't let me pay for anything since my mother died," Marcus said. "He won't accept help from me." His voice had something in it, not quite bitterness, more like the exhaustion of a person navigating a set of dynamics that have their own long history and do not resolve easily. "And then a stranger offers him soup and he accepts it." Lily looked at him. "Sometimes it's easier to accept things from someone who doesn't carry the history," she said. He looked at her. "That's a very straightforward thing to say." It seemed like the right moment for a straightforward thing. He was quiet for a moment. Then something shifted in his expression, and she thought she saw, beneath the competent surface of him, something tired and something that was probably grief and something that was probably guilt, all carefully managed but present. "He's been alone since April," Marcus said. 7 months. I've tried to be there. I haven't always managed it the way I should." A pause. "He would tell you I'm exaggerating, that he's fine, that he doesn't need anyone hovering over him. Is he fine?" Marcus looked at her steadily. "No," he said. "He is not." They sat with that for a moment, the honest weight of it. "He has that medical appointment next Thursday," she said. "I know. I'll take him." He said it with the decisiveness of a man making a promise to himself through the medium of telling another person, which she recognized as a specific kind of commitment that is harder to walk back than the kind you make in private. She nodded. He looked at her with the focused attention she had noticed when she first sat down, and there was something in his expression that had shifted since the beginning of the conversation, something that had moved past the careful gratitude of his initial texts into something more directly curious. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Yes." "Why did you stop?" "On the bench. Most people wouldn't have." Lily thought about the question with the seriousness it deserved. "I don't know exactly," she said honestly. Something about the way he was sitting, the held-in quality of it. She paused. I've worked with elderly patients for 3 years. You learn to read a certain kind of stillness, the stillness that isn't rest. She looked at her tea. And I thought about my grandmother. I always think about my grandmother. Tell me about her, he said. And he asked it the way Viktor had asked it, with the directness of someone who genuinely wants to know, which was a thing she was beginning to understand might be a family characteristic. So she told him about Nai, about the house on Birch Street and the photographs on the wall and the solitaire on the tablet and the opinions about hedge trimming and the morning kanji and the 60-some years of a woman managing her circumstances with a particular kind of unsentimental grace that had always struck Lily as the most impressive thing she had ever had close-up access to. Marcus listened without interrupting, which was, she was learning, also a family characteristic. When she finished, he said, Your grandmother and my father should meet. Lily looked at him. What makes you say that? Because they sound like the same kind of person, he said. The kind that made it through everything by deciding that making it through was what you did. No drama, no complaint, just forward. She thought about this. My grandmother would tell him his roses need a specific kind of winter pruning, she said. He would tell her she's wrong and then go and do exactly what she said. Marcus said, and for the first time he smiled, and it was the smile of a man who actually finds something funny, genuine and slightly surprised at itself. Lily smiled too. Outside, the November evening was settling over Harlow Falls with the particular quiet of a small mountain town after the workday ends. The coffee shop hummed softly around them, other people in other conversations, the smell of espresso and something baked, the window fogging slightly with warmth. She stayed for another hour. She had not intended to stay for another hour. When she left, he walked her to her car. At the door of the Civic, he said, Would you be willing to see him again? My father. I think it did him good. Yesterday. Lily thought about Viktor at the table in the hospital cafeteria, eating the soup with the careful intentionality of someone allowing themselves, for once, to be taken care of. She thought about the roses. She thought about what he had said about his wife, about learning to be a person without her. I work most mornings, she said. But I have Sundays. He nodded. I'll ask him. She got in her car. She drove home in the dark. She did not think, driving home, about the fact that Marcus had stayed for an hour without checking his phone once, or about the way he had listened when she talked, or about the smile that had been surprised at itself. She did not think about any of that. Or perhaps she thought about it briefly, and then put it away in the practical and orderly way she managed most things that were not immediately necessary. There was Nai to get home to. There was tomorrow's shift. There was the note on the kitchen table that needed writing every morning, the medications that needed organizing, the ordinary architecture of a life that required her full attention and rewarded it, mostly, with the quiet and specific satisfaction of something held together by genuine effort and genuine love. She went home. Nai was in the kitchen. The tea was already made. The following Sunday arrived the way Sundays arrived in November in the mountains, gray and unhurried, with the kind of stillness that made the ordinary sounds of a house carry further than they usually did. Lily heard Nai's slippers on the kitchen floor before she had fully woken up, heard the tap running and the particular sound of the kettle being filled, and lay in bed for 30 seconds allowing herself the rare indulgence of a morning that did not require her to be anywhere immediately. Then she got up. There was the medication case to check, the compression stockings, the note on the kitchen table that needed writing, and after that, if the morning continued to hold, she had made a tentative arrangement to visit a man on Millbrook Road who had roses that were not doing well without his wife. Marcus had texted her Friday evening. My father would like that. Sunday afternoon if you're free. He'll make tea. He is very serious about the tea. She had texted back that she was free and that she took tea seriously too, and there had been a pause before his reply and then, he'll appreciate that. He's particular about who he makes it for. She had not known what to do with that, so she had not done anything with it, which was generally her approach to information that did not require an immediate response. The morning went as mornings went. Medication sorted, breakfast made, the note written on the kitchen table in the large clear letters that were partly for Nai's benefit and partly for Lily's own peace of mind. Nai ate her congee with the focused attention she applied to food she approved of and told Lily 3 things about the neighbor who had walked past the window that morning, one of which was probably true and 2 of which were Nai's editorial additions, and Lily listened to all 3 with equal attention because the distinction between fact and interpretation had never been the point of these morning conversations. At 1 o'clock, she drove to Millbrook Road. The blue door opened before she had reached the porch steps. Viktor stood in the doorway with the cane in his left hand and an expression that was not quite a smile but was the nearest thing to one she had seen from him. He was wearing a cardigan over a collared shirt, which told her he had decided this was an occasion that merited dressing for it. "You came," he said. "I said I would," she said. "People say things," he said, stepping back to let her in. The house was warm and smelled of tea and old books and something she could not name, the specific smell of a house that has been lived in by the same people for a very long time and has absorbed them. The hallway was lined with photographs, the kind of collection that accumulates over decades without being designed, portraits and landscapes and candid moments, black and white images next to color ones, frames that did not match because they had been acquired at different times and from different places and the matching had never been the priority. She paused in the hallway looking at them, and Viktor waited without hurrying her, which she recognized as a form of grace. There were photographs of a younger Viktor, much younger, in what appeared to be Eastern Europe, perhaps in his 20s or 30s, standing outside buildings she did not recognize with an expression that was more open than the one she knew. There was a woman who appeared in photograph after photograph across the decades, dark-haired when young and then silver-haired, always with a particular quality of animation in her face, the face of someone who is genuinely engaged with wherever she is and whoever she is with. In the most recent photographs she was older, in her 70s, and the animation was still there. It had not diminished. "Your wife," Lily said. "Marta," Viktor said. "Yes. She had a wonderful face," Lily said. She said it simply because it was true and because she thought he would be able to tell the difference between a true thing and a sympathetic one. He looked at the photographs for a moment. "She was not beautiful in the conventional way," he said. "She would tell you that herself with some pride." She said conventional beauty was a distraction from more interesting qualities. He paused. "She had more interesting qualities than anyone I have ever known." Lily looked at a photograph near the end of the hall, Viktor and Marta on what appeared to be a hiking trail, both of them older, perhaps in their 60s, standing on a rocky outcrop with a valley behind them. They were not looking at the camera. They were looking at each other, and the look was not sentimental or posed. It was the look of 2 people in the middle of a conversation that had been going on for decades and was still worth having. "Come," Viktor said. "The tea." The kitchen was at the back of the house, large and slightly old-fashioned, with a wooden table that had the patina of years of use and a window that looked out over the back garden where more rose canes were visible, these ones climbing a trellis along the back fence, also bare now, also waiting. He made the tea with the careful ceremony of someone for whom tea preparation is not a task but a practice. She watched him without commenting, recognizing the ritual quality of it, the specific order in which things were done, the attention to temperature and time. Her grandmother made tea the same way, and she had learned watching Nai that the ceremony was not about the tea. It was about the daily proof that certain things still held. He set 2 cups on the table and sat across from her and looked at her with the sharp gray eyes that she had decided, over the past several days, were the most trustworthy thing about him, the part that did not perform. "Marcus told me you had coffee," he said. "We did," she said. "He said you talked for a long time." "We did," she said again, and did not elaborate, and he did not press. He wrapped his hands around his cup. "He is a good man," he said, in the tone of a person making a statement they believe to be true and also know to be complicated. "He has made choices I would not have made. He lives at a pace I do not understand. But he is a good man." He looked at his tea. "His mother would tell you the same thing. She would also tell you that the 2 of us have never been uncomplicated together. She was the one who translated between us." "Marta," Lily said. "Yes." A pause. "When she was gone, we lost the translator. We are still learning how to speak the same language without her." Lily thought about this. She thought about languages, about the years she had spent translating for Nai, not just the words but the space between them, the specific frequency on which two people who love each other communicate when they are very different kinds of people. That takes time, she said. More time than I expected, Viktor said. I thought I knew how to speak to my son. It turns out I knew how to speak to him through his mother. He drank his tea. She drank hers. Outside the window, a bird she couldn't identify landed on one of the rose canes and sat there for a moment before the wind bothered it away. Tell me about your work, he said. She told him. She told him about the third floor, about the specific population of people she spent her days with, about the particular way age concentrates character, makes some people smaller and others larger, burns away the non-essential and leaves behind whatever a person most essentially is. She told him about Mrs. Delacroix and her talking and Mr. Henderson and his silences and Dorothy, who had gone home last week and left a small thank you card at the nursing station that said, in handwriting that had become uncertain but was clearly once very precise, "Thank you to the girl with the kind hands." Viktor listened with the quality of attention she had already come to associate with him, full and unhurried, the kind that makes a person feel that what they are saying has actually been received rather than processed as background noise while the listener waits for their own turn. "You will go back to nursing," he said when she had finished. It was not a question. "I hope to," she said, "when the situation is more stable. It's not the right time yet." "Your grandmother's situation." "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something she had not expected. "What does it cost?" "The program. The nursing program." She looked at him. "Why do you ask?" "Curiosity," he said, with the slight neutrality she was beginning to recognize as the face he put on when he was being something other than merely curious. She gave him the general shape of it, the tuition, the schedule requirements, the way the arithmetic of it didn't work yet alongside Nai's needs and the existing bills. She was matter-of-fact about it, the way she was always matter-of-fact about the practical constraints of her life, because they were not things she was ashamed of, only things that needed managing. Viktor listened. He said nothing when she finished. He looked out the window at the rose canes. After a moment he said, "Marta always said that the people who are most needed in the world are the ones the world makes it hardest for to get where they're going." "She sounds like she was wise," Lily said. "She was often right, which is not exactly the same thing as wise but is perhaps more useful." He turned from the window. "She was right about most of the things I argued with her about, which I could acknowledge while she was alive only occasionally and which I have acknowledged entirely since April." Lily smiled. "That sounds like love." "It sounds like marriage," he said. But the way he said it was not a correction. It was an agreement. They sat together through the afternoon. He showed her the garden through the kitchen window, explaining what the roses would look like in May, the climbing ones on the back trellis, the dark red ones along the front walk. He used Marta's name naturally, without apology, the way you refer to someone who is still real to you and whose reality you are not going to diminish by avoiding their name in conversation. Lily found this not painful to be around but the opposite, a kind of honesty that made the air in the room feel more like itself. She told him about Nai's solitaire, about the opinions on hedge trimming, about the way her grandmother had navigated 40 years in a country that was not where she was born, with a combination of practicality and dignity that had always seemed to Lily like the most sophisticated possible response to difficulty. Viktor listened and asked questions that showed he had been listening, the specific questions that are only possible when a person has actually absorbed what they have been told. When she finally looked at her watch and saw it was past 4 o'clock, she was surprised. She had not noticed time passing, which was unusual for her. She generally noticed time the way a person notices money, carefully and continuously, because both required management. "I should go," she said. Nai will be wondering." He walked her to the door. At the blue door, he paused and looked at her with the direct quality she had come to trust. "Same time next week?" he said. She considered. She thought about the Sundays ahead, the gray November ones and the probably gray December ones, and this house with its warmth and its photographs and its particular quality of a life fully lived that was now in the process of reorganizing itself without the person who had been its center. "Same time next week," she said. He nodded. She went to her car. She sat in it for a moment before starting the engine, looking at the house with the blue door and the bare rose canes along the front walk. She started the car and drove home. Nai was waiting with the solitaire and the questions. Lily answered the questions and made dinner and sat at the kitchen table in the ordinary evening of her ordinary life and felt, quietly and without performing it for anyone, something that was adjacent to contentment. The Sundays developed into a pattern. Lily drove to Millbrook Road at 1 o'clock and Viktor made tea and they sat at the kitchen table and talked. Sometimes they talked about practical things, the roses, which she was learning about in more detail than she had expected to, Nai-Nai's situation, the particular logistics of caring for an elderly person while holding down a full-time job, the way medical paperwork accumulated and needed managing. Sometimes they talked about larger things, about what she wanted, about what he had learned, about Marta, about Nai-Nai, about the specific shape that loss takes when it is not the dramatic kind but the daily kind, the loss of routines and small habits and the person who knew what you meant before you had quite finished saying it. She never asked about his past. This was partly good manners and partly instinct, the sense that Viktor was a person who offered what he intended to offer and that pressing for more would not produce more but would produce a different and lesser kind of conversation. She understood, from their weeks of Sunday afternoons, that he had come from somewhere in Eastern Europe, that his English had been learned in adulthood and carried its origins in the precision of its construction, and that the house on Millbrook Road was not the house he had lived in longest, but was the house that mattered most, because Marta had chosen it and planted the roses and made it what it was. Marcus texted occasionally, sometimes to ask how Viktor seemed, sometimes to share a small update. His father had eaten well. His father had been to the doctor without incident. His father had told Marcus about something Lily had said with an approving quality that Marcus noted was unusual. Once he asked if she wanted to have dinner. She said yes before she had finished deciding whether to, which she noted with the slight self-awareness of a person observing their own instincts with academic interest. They had dinner at a restaurant in the older part of downtown, a converted Victorian house that served the kind of food that was serious without being precious about it. Marcus was different at dinner than he had been at coffee, slightly more at ease, as though the additional formality of the setting had paradoxically relaxed him. He asked her questions with the same direct quality his father had, and listened to the answers with the same focused attention, and she found herself thinking, not for the first time, about inherited characteristics. She asked him about his work. He was an architect. He had a small firm in Asheville with 3 other architects, residential and commercial, mostly renovation work in historic structures. He had been doing it for 15 years and spoke about it with the genuine enthusiasm of someone who has not yet been exhausted by what they love. "My father wanted me to go into finance," he said. He had some idea that the right career was one that produced a certain kind of visible stability. He paused. He wasn't wrong exactly. He just wasn't right about what stability looked like for me. "Did he come around?" Lily asked. "Mostly," Marcus said. "My mother helped. She told him that a person who builds things that last is doing something worth doing." He found that argument difficult to refute. A pause. She generally found arguments he couldn't refute. It was a specific skill. Lily thought about Viktor and Marta and the photograph. On the hiking trail, the conversation that had been going on for decades and was still worth having. "He misses her terribly," she said. "Yes," Marcus said simply. And the simplicity of it carried more weight than any elaboration would have. They talked about her nursing aspirations and his early career and Nai-Nai's opinions about solitaire strategy and the specific challenges of historic renovation in a mountain climate. They were at the restaurant for 2.5 hours and neither of them mentioned it until they were outside in the cold night air, and Lily looked at her watch and said, "It's nearly 9:30, with genuine surprise. Marcus looked at her in the light from the restaurant window. "I had a good time," he said, in the way of a person making a simple true statement without decoration. "So did I," she said in the same way. He walked her to her car. At the Civic, he said, "Would you like to do this again?" "Yes," she said, without the pause she might have expected to need. He smiled, the smile that was surprised at itself. She drove home. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. December came to Harlow Falls with purpose. The first real cold settling in over the mountains and bringing with it the particular quality of mountain winter. The bare trees and the long dark evenings and the smell of wood smoke on the air. The town decorated itself with some enthusiasm, strings of lights along Commerce Street and a tree in the small park near the courthouse, and the seasonal transformation of the storefronts that Lily walked past each morning. She noticed, around the second week of December, that Viktor was looking tired in a way he had not looked in October. Not the tiredness of grief which she had learned to read on him, but a physical tiredness, a kind of effortfulness to his movements that had not been there before. She did not say anything directly. She mentioned it to Marcus. He was quiet for a moment on the phone. "He has an appointment with the cardiologist next week," he said. "It's routine. He's had some minor issues with his heart for a few years. Nothing alarming so far." "How is he managing the medications?" she asked. A shorter pause. "I think mostly fine. He doesn't always tell me everything." "I know," she said. "He won't tell me either, not directly. But I notice things." "I know you do," Marcus said. And there was something in how he said it, a quality of genuine gratitude that had moved past the formal gratitude of his first text message into something more personal, more real. The following Sunday, she arrived at the Blue Door with a small container of congee she had made that morning under Nai-Nai's supervision. Nai-Nai had decided, over the previous weeks, that Viktor needed feeding properly and had appointed herself the authority on what this meant. The congee was a specific recipe, ginger and chicken, and a particular proportion of rice to water that Nai-Nai had been perfecting for decades and which she described, without false modesty, as medicinal. Viktor opened the door and looked at the container. "What is that?" he said. "Congee," Lily said. "My grandmother made it. She says it's good for the cold and for the constitution." "The constitution," he repeated. "She means health," Lily said. "Nai-Nai doesn't say health. She says constitution. It sounds more serious." Viktor looked at the container and then at Lily. "Your grandmother sounds like someone who knows what they're talking about." "On most subjects, yes." He stood back to let her in. He ate the congee at the kitchen table while the tea was steeping and said, after 3 spoonfuls, "This is very good," in the tone of a man who is surprised to find something very good and is not going to pretend otherwise. "I'll tell her," Lily said. "She'll be pleased. She'll immediately find a way to suggest how it could be improved, but she'll be pleased." Viktor looked at her. For the first time in weeks, something that was unambiguously close to amusement moved across his face. "Your grandmother," he said, "sounds very much like Marta." Lily looked at him. "Tell me how." So he told her. He told her about Marta in the specific way he had never quite done before, not the general outline of her but the specific texture of her, the way she had of pointing out improvements to things you had thought were already good, the way she had been both the warmest and the most honest person in any room she was in, the way her opinions on food were delivered with the absolute certainty of someone who has spent a lifetime being right about food and sees no reason to understate this. Lily listened with the full attention she gave to the things that mattered, and the warmth of the kitchen was around them and the tea was good and outside the December light was doing what it did over the mountains, clean and cold and distant. At some point during this conversation, Viktor stopped mid-sentence. He set down the spoon. He looked at the table. "Are you all right?" Lily said. He looked up. His expression was composed, but beneath the composure was something she recognized from the bench that first morning, the held-in quality of a person trying to contain something that is pressing against the container. "I had a telephone call yesterday," he said, "from someone in Zurich." She waited. "I have not spoken to this person for several years," Viktor said carefully. "He is a lawyer. He was calling about a business matter." He paused. "A matter that involves a significant amount of money." Lily looked at him steadily and said nothing. "I came to this country many years ago," Viktor said, "with very little. I built something here, and I built something before here in Europe which I sold when we came to America. I have been, in my life, in a position of some financial responsibility." He said it with the careful understatement of someone who has spent decades not saying the full true thing, and she heard the understatement clearly. "Marta and I agreed when we came to Harlow Falls that we wanted a simple life. She was very clear about this. She said she had seen what money done wrong did to people and she did not want it in the house." He paused. "I agreed with her completely. We had everything we needed." Lily looked at him. "The call from Zurich," she said. "There is a trust," he said. It has been managed for many years by the law firm. Since my retirement, a portion of a business sale, Marta handled most of the correspondence. He stopped. I have not been attending to it properly since April. I did not have the capacity to attend to it properly. He looked at the table. It is apparently now a matter of some urgency. Is it something Marcus can help with? She asked. Something moved across Viktor's face at that, not refusal, more like reluctance, the reluctance of a man who has spent a long time managing things on his own and for whom asking for help, even from his son, requires a specific internal adjustment. I have not told Marcus the full scope, he said, of the financial situation. He knows I was in business before. He does not know the particulars. Lily absorbed this. Why not? Viktor was quiet for a moment. Because Marta and I agreed that he should build his own life on his own foundation, he said. We did not want him to know that there was a foundation beneath the foundation. We wanted him to choose architecture because he loved it, not because he could afford to fail. He paused. He chose architecture because he loved it, so we were right. But now the trust is a matter of urgency, Lily said. Yes. And you need to deal with it. Yes. She looked at him. You should tell him, Viktor. He looked at his hands. Yes, he said again, in the tone of a man who knows the right answer and has known it for some time and is working himself toward actually doing it. She did not push further. She understood the distance between knowing the right thing and doing it, and that pushing rarely shortened it. They had their tea. They talked about the roses, about what needed doing before the hard freeze came, about the specific variety of the climbing ones on the back trellis and whether she could take a cutting in spring and try to root it. Viktor was emphatic on the subject of the correct method of taking cuttings, and she listened carefully and asked the right questions, and the conversation settled back into its familiar warmth. When she left at 4, he stood in the door of the blue door and looked at her with the sharp gray eyes. Lily, he said. She turned. You are very easy to talk to, he said. I don't say that lightly. I am not easy to talk to, and I notice when someone makes it easier. She looked at him. You're easy to talk to as well, she said. I don't say that lightly either. He nodded once. She went to her car. The call came on a Thursday morning, 2 days later. She was on her break, in the hospital cafeteria with her tea and her granola bar, when the unknown number lit up her phone. She answered because she had developed a habit of answering unknown numbers since the morning Viktor had texted from his son's phone. It was not Viktor. It was not Marcus. The voice was male, slightly younger than Marcus, and carried an edge of something that was not quite aggression but was its immediate neighbor. Is this Lily Chen? It said. It is, she said. My name is Richard Haas. My father is Viktor Haas. I understand you've been spending time at his house. She was quiet for a moment, absorbing the fact that she now had a last name for Viktor. Haas. She turned it over in her mind briefly and set it aside for later consideration. I visit on Sundays, she said. We have tea. I see, Richard said, and the way he said it managed to contain, in 2 syllables, a comprehensive skepticism that she found immediately and thoroughly unpleasant. And how exactly did you meet my father? I met him on a bench, she said. In November. He had been waiting for someone who didn't come. A pause. He told me about that, Richard said. He didn't mention that you'd been back several times. He didn't mention you at all, she said, which was true, and which she said in the same calm level tone she used for things that were true and that she intended the other person to hear clearly. Another pause. Longer this time. Ms. Chen, he said, and his voice had shifted into a register she recognized from people who have decided they are dealing with a problem that requires managing. My father is a 77-year-old widower with a significant estate. I want to be direct with you. The frequency of your visits, and the fact that you've been receiving money. I haven't received money, she said. He's told me he's been discussing financial matters with you. He mentioned that he had a call from a lawyer, she said. I told him he should talk to Marcus about it. That's the full extent of our conversation about finances. Marcus, Richard said, with an inflection that managed to be both dismissive and something more, something with a longer history behind it that she was only hearing the edge of. His son, Lily said. Your brother, I assume. Half-brother, Richard said, in the tone of a person for whom the distinction matters considerably. She sat with this for a moment. The architecture of the family was becoming clearer, not in a way she had been looking for but in the way that relevant information tends to arrive, when you are paying attention to something else and the edges of the picture reveal themselves. Mr. Haas, she said. I'm a patient care aide at Harlow Falls Community Hospital. I found your father alone on a bench in the cold and I stopped to help him because that's what I do. I visit him on Sundays because he is a man in grief who benefits from company and I benefit from his. There is no financial motive. I don't need one. She paused. I have to get back to my shift. She ended the call. She sat for a moment with her tea, which had gone cold, and thought about Richard Haas's voice and the particular quality of the skepticism in it, the kind that comes not from observation but from calculation, from a person who has been watching a situation through the lens of their own interests and has decided what they are seeing. She thought about what Viktor had said about the trust, the matter of urgency, the lawyer in Zurich. She did not think about any of this for long. She had a shift to finish and she was constitutionally disinclined to spend her energy on things she could not yet address. She threw away the cold tea, got a fresh cup, and went back to the third floor. That evening, she told Marcus about the call. He was quiet for a moment that was longer than his usual pauses. Then he said, Richard. Yes. Another pause. He called you directly. He had my number, apparently. From your father, I assume. Or he found it somewhere. I'll talk to him, Marcus said. You don't need to do that on my account, she said. I can handle a phone call. I know you can, he said. I'm going to talk to him because there are things that need to be said between us that have nothing to do with you and everything to do with our father and a situation that's been building for a long time. She heard the specific weight in the last part of that sentence and did not press it. Is there something I should know? She said. A pause. Richard is 8 years older than me, Marcus said. He's from my father's first marriage. My mother was my father's second wife. Richard and my father have had a difficult relationship for most of my life, and since my mother died it has been complicated by other things. He stopped. The trust, he said. Viktor mentioned it, she said. My mother managed most of the communication with the legal firm, Marcus said. Richard has been waiting a long time for my mother not to be in the picture. He believes the trust should be restructured. He believes my father's affairs are not being managed properly. Another pause. He believes a lot of things that are convenient for him to believe. Lily was quiet for a moment. Viktor said he hadn't told you the full scope of the financial situation, she said. He hasn't, Marcus said. I know more than he thinks I know and less than I should. My mother told me some things before she died. She wanted me to be prepared. A pause. She also made me promise not to push my father before he was ready to talk about it. That sounds like something she would do, Lily said, and said it with the warmth she had developed for Marta through Viktor's descriptions, the woman who translated, who found arguments that couldn't be refuted, who called the stubborn roses stubborn and loved them for it. Yes, Marcus said softly. It does. They were quiet together for a moment on the phone, the particular quiet of two people who are each thinking about loss and who do not need to say so. She would have liked you, Marcus said. It was not a casual thing. He said it with the directness that was his characteristic and his inheritance. Lily held the phone and felt something move in her chest that she did not immediately name. I would have liked her, she said, which was also the simple and true thing. She drove to Millbrook Road the following Sunday with the kanji and the full awareness that something was gathering around the quiet life of the man in the Blue Door house, gathering in the specific way that things gather when money and family and grief converge around a person who is still learning to inhabit a world without the person who kept it all in balance. Viktor opened the door. He looked at the kanji container with something that was now unambiguously affection. Your grandmother again, he said. She sends her regards, Lily said. She also sends specific instructions about reheating it, which I am to deliver verbatim. He smiled. This one was unambiguous. Come in, he said. I have something to show you. He led her not to the kitchen but to a small room off the hallway that she had not been in before. It was a study, with bookshelves floor to ceiling on 2 walls and a large desk and a single window that looked out onto the front garden where the rose canes were bare and waiting. On the desk were papers, organized with the careful precision of a man who takes the organization of papers seriously. "I called the lawyer," Viktor said. "In Zurich. Yesterday." She looked at him. "I told him I would be dealing with the matter directly," he said, "and that all future correspondence should come to me." He paused. "I also told him that I intended to involve my son Marcus in the management of the trust going forward." Lily looked at him steadily. "Good," she said. "He said there had been pressure from another party," Viktor said carefully. "A family member, requesting that certain restructuring discussions be accelerated." "Richard," she said. He looked at her sharply. Then something relaxed in his expression. "Marcus told you." "Some," she said. "Enough." He sat in the chair behind the desk. He looked at the papers. "Richard was 6 years old when I met his mother," he said. "I was not a perfect stepfather. I was young and ambitious and not always present in the ways that a child needs. When his mother and I separated, the relationship became difficult." He looked at his hands. "I tried over the years to make it right. I was not always successful." A pause. "Richard is not a bad man. He is a man who spent his childhood waiting for something he never quite received and who has decided, in adulthood, to find other ways to receive it." Viktor looked at the papers. "I understand this. Understanding does not mean I will let it happen." Lily sat in the chair on the other side of the desk, the visitor's chair, and looked at the old man with the sharp eyes and the cardigan and the papers organized on his desk and thought about the shape of a life, the way choices made in youth reach forward across decades and become the landscape you are navigating in old age. She thought about Nai, who had her own landscape, her own choices, her own forward reach. "You should tell Marcus everything," she said. "Not some of it. Everything." Viktor looked at her. "He will be angry," he said, "that I kept it from him." "Probably," she said. "He'll also be on your side. And you need someone on your side who knows the whole picture." Viktor was quiet. Then he said, "You are on my side." "Yes," she said, "but I don't know the whole picture either." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said something she had not expected. "You are the first person since Marta died who I have wanted to tell the whole picture to," he said. "That is not a small thing for a man like me." Lily held his gaze across the desk. "Then tell me," she said. He told her. Took the better part of the afternoon. He told her carefully and in sequence, the way a person tells a story they have been constructing in their own mind for a long time, waiting for the right person to tell it to. He told her about coming from Czechoslovakia as a young man in 1972, about the business he had built in Vienna in his 30s, about the sale of that business in 1991, about meeting Marta in Vienna in 1978 and about Marcus born in 1980 and about the decision to come to America in 1993, when Marcus was 13, to begin again in a country that had no memory of who they had been. He told her about building another business in Charlotte, smaller and more deliberate than the Vienna one, a property development company that he had run for 20 years and sold at 65 when Marta had said she was done with cities and done with winter and had found a house in a small mountain town with a blue door and a garden where she intended to plant roses. He told her about the trust, about the figure in the trust, which he named directly and without the careful understatement she had heard from him before. She did not react to the number, not outwardly. She absorbed it with the same composure she absorbed most things, which was the composure of a person who has learned that reacting to information is less useful than understanding it. The number was very large. She thought about the bench outside the CVS, the cold morning, the man sitting alone with no hat and no taxi fare, and she thought about what that said about who Viktor Haas was, about the distance between what he had and what he needed from a day, and she thought that Marta had been right. They had everything they needed. "Richard knows the approximate size of the trust?" she said. "He has known for some years," Viktor said. "His mother was not careful about confidentiality. And he believes he has a claim. He believes he should be involved in the management of it. He believes Marcus should not be, because Marcus has not known about it." Viktor paused. He does not know that Marcus and I have been moving toward a different arrangement. He found out about me, Lily said. Yes, he called me last week as well. He asked about you. Viktor looked at her. I told him you were a friend. He asked if I had discussed financial matters with you. I told him that you had advised me to speak with my son, which is the truth. A pause. He did not like this answer. No, Lily said. He called me 2 days later. Viktor looked at her with something that was not quite anger, more a clear-eyed assessment of a situation combined with the particular protectiveness that she had noticed in him from early on, the protectiveness of a person who does not often allow people close and who, when they do, considers that a serious matter. He should not have done that, Viktor said. I handled it, she said. I know you did, he said. That is not the point. She looked at him across the desk. Viktor, she said, I need you to understand something. Whatever comes of this, with Richard, with the trust, with Marcus, I am not involved because of what's in that trust. I hope you know that. He looked at her for a long moment, the sharp gray eyes with their quality of direct and honest seeing. I know that, he said. I knew it the morning you sat beside me in the CVS and told me I was right not to trust reassurances about the store manager. She almost smiled. That was a specific and unusual thing to know me by. I notice specific and unusual things, he said. It has served me well. The December light through the study window was going long and amber. The rose canes outside cast thin shadows across the frost-pale lawn. Somewhere in the house, something settled, a timber or a board, the small sound of an old house adjusting to the cold. Will you stay for dinner? Viktor said. It was the first time he had asked. I make a reasonable soup. Marta's recipe. I have been practicing. Lily thought about Nai-Nai's note on the kitchen table and the evening medications and the ordinary architecture of her life that required her presence. She thought about the soup. I have to check on Nai-Nai first, she said. I can call her. If she's settled for the evening, I'll stay. She called from the hallway while Viktor went to the kitchen. Nai-Nai answered on the third ring with the particular voice she used when she was in the middle of her evening program and had been interrupted. Are you all right? Lily said. I am watching my program, Nai-Nai said. Are you all right? I'm at Viktor's. He's making soup. Can I stay a bit longer? A pause. The old man, Nai-Nai said in Mandarin. Yes. His son will be there? Not tonight, Lily said. Another pause. Longer. He feeds you properly? Nai-Nai said. He's making soup. What kind? I don't know yet. Ask him, Nai-Nai said firmly. If it's vegetable, tell him it needs more ginger. If it's chicken, tell him 40 minutes minimum. I will tell him, Lily said. Good, said Nai-Nai. Stay as long as you need. The program is almost over. I'll take my medication at 8 and go to bed. Are you sure? I am 78 years old. Nai said, with the particular dignity of a woman for whom this sentence constitutes a complete argument. I know how to take my medication. Yes, Nai. Go eat soup, Nai said and ended the call. Lily stood in the hallway for a moment smiling at her phone. Then she went to the kitchen. It was chicken soup. She told Viktor 40 minutes minimum, attributing this to her grandmother. He looked at her with the corner of the mouth movement that was his version of amusement and said the soup had already been on for 55 minutes. Then she would approve, Lily said. Good, said Viktor. I find I care about your grandmother's approval. She would be very pleased to hear that, Lily said, and would immediately tell you what could be improved about the soup. I look forward to it, Viktor said. She sat at the kitchen table while he finished the soup and set 2 bowls and bread and butter on the table with the unhurried care of someone who has decided that this meal deserves proper attention. He sat across from her and they ate together in the kitchen of the house with the blue door as the December dark came down over the mountains outside the window and the rose canes disappeared into it. The soup was very good. She told him so. He said his wife's recipe was the reason, and for once he said it without the careful understatement, without the held-in quality. He said it plainly, a man crediting the person he loved for something she had made and left behind, and the plainness of it was its own kind of comfort. She drove home at 8 o'clock with the bowl Nai had sent sitting empty on the passenger seat. Nai was in bed when she got home. The medication case showed 8 o'clock had been taken. The note on the kitchen table had a small addition in Nai's handwriting, in Mandarin characters, 3 words that translated as, "Did you eat?" Lily wrote underneath it in the same characters, "Yes. Chicken soup. Good but needs ginger." She went to bed. She did not think about the number Viktor had told her. Or rather, she thought about it briefly, in the specific way that very large numbers are briefly and incomprehensibly large and then stop meaning anything in particular. What she thought about instead was the soup and the study with the bookshelves and the photograph of Marta and Viktor on the hiking trail and the rose canes outside the window going into the dark. She thought about what Viktor had said. "You are the first person since Marta died who I have wanted to tell the whole picture to." She lay in the dark and held that, and felt the weight of it, which was not a light weight. It was the weight of something real and serious that had been placed in her hands by someone who did not place things in other people's hands easily or often. She thought about Richard Haas's voice on the phone, the 2 syllables of that calculated skepticism. She thought about the lawyer in Zurich and the urgency. She thought about Marcus, who knew some things and was about to learn the rest. She thought about all of it and she did not look away from any of it, and eventually she slept. In the morning, there was the note to write, the medications to sort, and Nai in the kitchen saying something about ginger. Life continued, as it always did, one ordinary day pressed up against the next. And beneath the ordinary days, the things that were not ordinary at all were moving forward in the quiet and inevitable way that important things move when they have finally been set in motion. She walked to work. It was cold. The mountains were there. She tucked her chin and moved toward the day. The call Marcus had been building toward came on a Tuesday evening in the 2nd week of January. Viktor asked him to come to the house on Millbrook Road. Marcus came. They sat in the study with the bookshelves and the single window, and Viktor told his son everything. Lily was not there. She did not need to be. She had planted the seed of it weeks ago across a kitchen table with soup going cold between them, and she understood that some conversations belong only to the people having them. Marcus called her afterward. His voice was quiet and steady in the way of someone who has absorbed something large and is still finding its shape inside him. "He told me everything," Marcus said. "I know," she said. "You knew most of it already." "He needed to tell you himself," she said. "That's why I didn't say anything." A pause. "He said you told him to tell me. I told him you'd be on his side." "I am," Marcus said, simply, without decoration. "I am completely on his side." They stayed on the phone for a long time that evening, not always talking, sometimes just present in the quiet together, which she had come to understand was its own language between them. The following week, Richard Haas drove to Harlow Falls. He arrived unannounced at the Blue Door on a Thursday morning when Viktor was alone. Viktor called Lily at noon. His voice was composed, but she heard beneath the composure the particular quality she had learned to read in him, the held-in thing, present and pressing. "He came," Viktor said. "What did he want?" "He wants to contest the trust structure. He has found a lawyer who believes there is an argument to be made." A pause. "He also said things about you." She was quiet. "He said you had positioned yourself deliberately," Viktor said. "That your friendship with Marcus was calculated. That you had identified a vulnerable elderly man and worked your way into his confidence for financial gain." He stopped. "He said it very clearly and in my own house." Lily sat with this for a moment. She thought about the bench in November and the cold morning and the 3 minutes she had not had and had stopped anyway. She thought about the soup and the tea and the Sunday afternoons and the photograph of Marta on the hiking trail. She thought about Nai's kanji sent with love to a man she had never met. "What did you say?" she asked. "I said," Viktor told her in a voice that was very quiet and entirely certain, "that I have known many people in my life who wanted something from me. I know exactly what that looks like. And I said that you are not one of them. And I said that what you are is the kind of person my wife would have recognized immediately and trusted completely, and that my wife's judgment was never wrong in 51 years. He paused. "And then I asked him to leave my house." Lily closed her eyes for a moment. He threatened legal action, Viktor continued. He has grounds to challenge certain elements of the trust structure if he can demonstrate that I am not of sound mind or that I have been unduly influenced. A pause. His lawyer believes proximity and financial ignorance on my part are arguable. Are they? She said. I have already spoken to Franklin in Zurich, Viktor said, and to a family law specialist in Asheville that Marcus found. The trust is sound. My mind is sound. And the documentation of Richard's own behavior over the past several months, his pressure on the firm, his communications, his visit this morning, is now being compiled. He stopped. He chose the wrong morning to come to my house. Marcus had engaged a firm in Asheville within 48 hours of Viktor's full disclosure. The case Richard's lawyer attempted to build dissolved with the particular speed of a thing that was never structurally sound. The documentation was too clear. Viktor's communications with the Zurich firm showed a man fully in command of his affairs. The records showed a son, Marcus, who had been kept from information not through manipulation but through a parent's deliberate and loving choice. Richard's lawyer withdrew from the matter 4 weeks later. Richard did not call Viktor again. He did not call Lily again. The silence he left behind was not a painful silence. It was simply empty, the way a room is empty when something that was taking up space has been cleared out, and the room turns out to be perfectly fine without it. Spring came to Harlow Falls the way it always came to the mountains, later than the rest of the world and more deliberately, as if the mountains wanted to be certain before they committed. In April, the rose canes on Millbrook Road began to show the first tentative green at the joints, the stubborn roses doing exactly what they had always done, returning without being asked. On a Saturday in April, Nai came to Millbrook Road. Marcus drove her. She sat in the passenger seat of his car with her purse on her lap and her good coat buttoned and the expression of a woman attending an occasion that merits preparation. When Marcus helped her up the porch steps, she examined the rose canes with the focused attention of an expert. "These need pruning," she told Marcus, in Mandarin that he did not speak but somehow understood. Viktor opened the blue door. Nai looked at him. He looked at her. Two people in their 70s who had each, in their own way, outlasted difficulty and arrived at something worth arriving at. Viktor said good afternoon. Nai said, in careful English she produced for occasions that required it, that she had heard he made reasonable soup but that it needed ginger. Viktor looked at her for 1 full second. Then he laughed. A real laugh, full and unhurried. The kind Lily had not heard from him before. "Come inside," he said. "I will make tea. You will tell me about the ginger." They went in. Lily stood on the porch for a moment with Marcus beside her, looking at the rose canes and the first green showing at the joints. "She's going to reorganize his entire kitchen," Lily said. "He's going to let her," Marcus said. "Yes," Lily said. "He is." Marcus took her hand. She let him. They stood together on the porch in the April light with the mountains steady behind the town and the stubborn roses coming back the way they always came back, and inside the house 2 old people arguing productively about ginger, which is its own kind of love. The nursing program letter arrived on a Thursday morning in May. Lily read it at the kitchen table. She read it twice. Then she folded it carefully and held it in both hands and sat with it for a moment. She did not think about what Viktor had arranged with the trust, the quiet and specific provision he had made, documented properly and above reproach, that removed the financial barrier that had stood between her and the program for 3 years. She had argued against it. He had listened to the argument and then told her, in the voice of a man who has made a decision that will not be revisited, that she had given him something no amount of money could have provided when he needed it most, and that what he was offering in return was simply the removal of an obstacle, and that she should not confuse a gift with a debt because they were not the same thing. She had looked at him across the kitchen table for a long time. Then she had said yes. She set the letter on the table and went to Nai's room and opened the door. Nai was at the window with her morning tea, looking out at the yard where the hedge needed trimming in the specific way Nai had opinions about. "The letter came," Lily said. Nai looked at her. She read her daughter's face the way she had always read it, completely and without error. "Good," Nai said. She turned back to the window. "Now go call Marcus, and then trim the hedge." Lily stood in the doorway and looked at her grandmother in the morning light, small and upright and entirely herself, and felt something settle in her chest that had been quietly unsettled for a very long time. She called Marcus. She trimmed the hedge. She went to work. Some people walk past a bench in the cold without stopping. And some people stop. That single choice, made in 3 minutes that were not there to spare, had changed the shape of everything. Not because of what came after it, but because of what it said about who Lily Chen was before anything came after it. She was not kind because kindness was rewarded. She was kind the way certain roses are stubborn, by nature and without negotiation, coming back every year regardless of what the weather brings, because that is simply what they do. And sometimes the world, which is not always fair and not always paying attention, looks up on exactly the right morning and finally sees. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.